too.
Give me a shout when we're live, Donald, and I'll crack on.
Live now, Park.
That's great. Thanks very much. Hello, everyone. Merry Christmas and welcome to our webinar, Unwrapping AI, UX Perspective. My name is Padraic Lynch and I lead the 100% online UX Design Masters at ATU. The Atlantic Technology University is based on the northwest and west coast of Ireland. Spectacular place. If you haven't had a chance to visit, please come and visit. I'm thrilled to say that we have two of the most prominent leaders from the world of UX with us today, both VPs in the Nielsen Norman Group. I'm looking forward to picking the brains of Sarah and Kate and listening to how they go about unwrapping AI from a UX perspective. But before that, I want to provide just a bit of context around how we all ended up here today. At ATU, we're currently accepting applicants for our 100% online Masters in UX Design. And I'm eager kind of to engage the audience that would be interested in hearing about our new delivery schedule. So it's really designed around this ideal work-life balance, especially from studying a master's at level 9 can be quite difficult to get time to do that. So you can attend from anywhere in the world. It's 100% online. As I say, we've been running for 6 years and our alumni stretches from Kuala Lumpur to Rio, from Berlin to Balahi, from Mayo to Manchester and New York to Newcastle West. So we've had students from all over. Our new schedule is based on feedback from our past and present students, and our live classes will now take place over 7 weeks. In Greenwich Mean Time, that's 5 to 7 p.m. But it also works well for if you're across the water, which would be around lunchtime, 12 to 2 p.m. So there's lots of possibilities there. The intake, the reason to call out, I suppose, today is because we have an intake coming in January. The course starts in January and finishes in September 2025. So if you're interested, please reach out to myself or Donald Hannigan, who's on the call here as well, if you want any further information on that there. We've lots of different students coming from different backgrounds, so it's not just for designers. There's innovative leaders in there, product owners, graduates, developers, analysts, and so on. So it's people that really want to turbo boost their career in around the UX design area. Donald, if you can put a post up at some stage during the chat with a link to the website, that would be useful as well. So that's really the sales pitch. But what I want to do really now is get down to business of why we're here today. And I want to get chatting to these two ladies about AI and UX. I suppose with whether we like it or not, AI has weaved its way into our day-to-day lives. We can either put our head in the sand or we can embrace it. I heard Sarah Gibbons talking on Patricia Reiner's podcast there recently, The Future UX, and it was a really interesting insight into AI and UX. But I wanted to see if she wanted to delve a little bit deeper into that. And I soon realized that I was surprised, first of all, that she said yes, which is great. Thanks very much, Sarah. But I soon realized that she was a passionate educator. And the first thing she did was bring Kate Moran on board as well. So we're going to hear from both of them today. And thanks to everybody in the audience that submitted questions during the week. We've compiled them, we've got them ready. But before we get into the questioning, I'm going to hand over to Sarah and Kate to introduce themselves, and then we'll get into the questioning then. So whichever one of you want, if you can introduce yourself.
I can jump in. Hi, everyone. It's great to meet you, have you here. I'd love to hear where everyone is joining from. Kate and I are really excited to be here. I come from a design background and have been kind of leading the design force at NNG for a while now, almost 8 years, which is wild. And recently have been doing a lot of thinking and also research in AI. So we're really excited to just jump in. We're going to have a casual conversation. Yeah. You can drop anything in the chat as we get going. I can't promise we'll answer it, but we can certainly weave it in if it makes sense. And my amazing colleague and fellow vice president at NNG, Kate, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. Great to meet you virtually. Really excited to chat about AI and UX. It's definitely very much on our minds over at NNG, as Sarah mentioned. At Nielsen Norman Group, we really try to focus on providing practical, grounded, realistic advice for UX practitioners. And that often involves trying to help people kind of cut through the hype or the claims. And there are certainly a lot of those floating around in AI right now. So that is something that that we're actively working on. We've been, as Sarah said, conducting lots of research on AI, thinking about how this is changing user behaviors and dynamics and mental models, and also how UX practitioners can integrate AI into their own workflows. So I'm excited to talk about that today.
Great. Thanks very much, Kate. Thanks, Sarah. What we're going to do now is we've got 4 or 5 questions which we're going to bring up on the screen one at a time. And if anyone has any comments on or additional information, I suppose, around that, please feel free to drop it into the chat. We want to make this dynamic and interactive. But I suppose the first one to kick us off, Sarah, I'll maybe ask you this one. What is most important to think about when it comes to AI?
Yeah, it's a good question. I saw this in the forum, and it feels simple, but with the amount of information out there about AI and the things on LinkedIn and the articles, and maybe your stakeholders are starting to tell you to use AI and think about how to integrate it. There's a lot of different lenses that you can approach AI with. And so I think, to me, some of you may be designing AI products, but I think that's actually the minority. I think a lot of people are trying to figure out how to use AI in their work to make them more productive, efficient, and increase your likelihood of success, right? Because that's really what it is. And so when I think about it now, and this is evolving, so I definitely want to say this could change in the future, but I think it really comes down to 2 things. And Kate and I have been talking about this a lot, which is context and curation. So context being not just the context that you're giving the tool, but the context that you're using AI. Because AI is really powerful, but it's not the answer to everything, just like every other tool, right? You're not going to use Photoshop if you're trying to write a paper. And AI is somewhat similar, right? But it is really diverse, so you can use it in a lot of different ways. But the context, meaning what you're trying to do with it and your expertise in that and how high stakes that is really important. I think that right now, with where AI is, it's really good as kind of an early on to diverge and then to converge at the end. But it's not going to replace, your critical thinking skills and application. So I think I'm really thinking about context a lot. And then on the curation front, I have a hypothesis that as more and more people are going to be creating and able to create anything, the difference is going to become how you curate the things that you create and the taste that you develop, and the decision of what you're going to use from what AI can generate. So, and that's a really kind of, I'm talking about generative AI because I think it's the most straightforward and how the majority of people are using AI right now. So to me, most important things to think about: context and curation. Kate, what do you have? You're nodding. What do you think?
No, I totally, I agree with you because we talk about this like every day. Yeah, I would just add to that when people are kind of getting started with AI, it seems like a lot of people are very intimidated by it, which is totally normal anytime there's a new technology, and particularly something like this where the interaction dynamic is totally different from, most other tools you've ever used in your life. So I think one thing is, if you're not starting to play with AI in your day-to-day life yet, I really encourage you to do that, because just kind of, asking it questions, giving it, prompts and directions, and seeing how these large language models sort of respond and what they're good at and they're not good at getting a feel for that right now is really important.
Hey,
Also,
we should reiterate that right now, I think figuring out when AI works and when it doesn't is key. And you should be doing that. Like that is such a small point, but it's so important. Things that are low risk and that you have an ability to discern accuracy and quality. And those are perfect scenarios to be using AI.
And you can do it, like, just start with your day-to-day, like, personal life. You don't have to start using it for work things, right away. But like, for example, I'm hosting a little get together for the holidays for my neighbors tomorrow. And so I went to ChatGPT and said, I'm having this many people come over. It's this kind of party. Write me out a list of all of the, snacks I should prepare, and then give me a grocery list that's organized by the different departments in the grocery store. Like kind of a silly, low risk thing, but like that, those are the kinds of interactions where you can start building up a feel for AI. Another thing that I think is really a challenge for people right now is keeping up with the pace of change. And it is super overwhelming. Like there are new models and, new iterations of these tools and new, versions of interfaces coming out all the time. It can feel really overwhelming. You don't have to keep up with, every news item about AI that's coming out. But it is a good idea to just kind of keep tabs on it. So maybe like, once a month or so, you try to check in with some of the news and the developments if this is an area where you want to grow and develop skills. And maybe the last thing I'll say is like, it's really important to treat AI as like an intern. So you don't want to let it, write your final deliverable that you're going to send to a client or your stakeholders. But it's a fine place to start and get some ideas or get a first draft or speed up your desk research.
Yeah, AI is really powerful, but it can be really dumb. So it's this balancing act, right? And that's the kind of curation piece of it to me. So
that's great. Thanks very much for that. And there's a very healthy discussion going on here in the chat as well. I think Jack from UK completely agrees with you. Context is everything. Hi to Danny there in Berlin. We've people coming in from all over here. This is brilliant. It's going to be lively. The first thing when I first I suppose got chatting myself and Donald here, who's working away in the background, got chatting to Kate and Sarah. We thought with names like Moran and Gibbons, there's definitely some Irish connections in there. And case in point, Kate is actually wearing a Guinness Christmas jumper as well.
Yes.
So, okay, let's look at question 2 here. Kate, this one's for yourself.
Okay.
This one's not easy now, so get ready for this one. What are the potential pitfalls or ethical concerns that UXers should be mindful of when incorporating AI into their workflow or designs?
Okay. So there's a lot there. This is definitely we won't be able to cover everything in the time that we have, but a couple of quick things that come to mind. And so Sarah said earlier that she's very much on the design side. I am really her research counterpart. I'm my passions are research and content, and that's what I oversee as VP at Nielsen Norman Group. So the first thing that comes to mind for me when I think about ethics and UX and specifically research for using AI for those purposes is participant data. It's very important. There are a lot of things you can do with AI to help accelerate your UX research. Things like it can create a first draft of a research plan for you. It can help you brainstorm or rewrite tasks. That's all fine. What you don't want to do is take all of your participant data, especially if there's any protected data or private data in that set, like names or things like that, drop it into something like ChatGPT, because you don't know how that data is going to be used. And so it's really important that if you have any participant data, that you scrub it really well, make sure that it is totally anonymized, before you try to show that to any kind of AI tool. I also think like, well, I'll pause there. Sarah, do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, there's a lot. I agree. This is a really big one to unpack. And I think that this would have to be a 8-hour for a week discussion. There are also full practitioners in the ethics of AI. And definitely in the guidelines in terms of the designers creating AI and making some of these really high level decisions. But I think for all of you, we're all practitioners, right? So it's the ethics of us using it for our work. And I think to Kate's point, the most important one is knowing that the data you put into it is then being fed into the world, and it's no longer private or yours. And I think that that's really important. And then I think from a design point of view, knowing that what you're getting back comes from a combination of the world, which oftentimes means other artists. So I know that there's a lot of ethical discussion around especially image generation and the artistic rights of a lot of that. But I think, again, context, where are you using it? What are you using it for? And are you being ethical about the way that you're using it?
Yep. The other thing I would say, and this probably is important for research, or the research side and the design side to consider. I've seen lately a lot of tools that are being marketed at UX professionals, specifically UX researchers, that are making some absolutely wild claims about what AI is going to do for you and your products and your research practice. And one of the most outrageous things I've seen is the claim that you can use AI to analyze your research data, which that, first of all, I have some concerns and questions about that, because from the tools that I've been using, the teams that I've been talking to who are creating these tools, again, I would say like AI can analyze your data like an intern could analyze your data, which means like you still should be checking up on it. But one of the most ethically concerning claims is it will analyze your data without bias. And the implication being you are biased, which we are. We know human beings, we all have bias and biases that impact the way that we interact with the world. One of the most dangerous in research is confirmation bias, where you already have a pre-existing idea of what you want to find in the data and you're looking for that. I do think AI might be helpful in reducing some of those types of biases, but AI systems and large language models, they do have bias because they're only as good or as unbiased as the data they're fed on. So I think this notion that, oh yeah, it's going to eliminate bias in your research is a really dangerous one.
Yeah, I think a really good way to summarize this, Port, before we maybe take the next question, is we were conducting a usability test for some image generation for some research that we're doing right now. And a user quote that has really stuck with me, I told Kate about this, is this user said, "Don't you love when it makes a liar out of you?" And it was a really interesting moment because this user put in something and knew exactly what should come back, and something completely different came back. And it was a really interesting moment where the user was made kind of a liar, even though she was right, based on what the AI fed back to her. So I thought that was a really good user quote. Don't you love when it makes a liar out of you?
Yeah, so sometimes it's so hard to spot. Like we've got this. It's really only landed on our desk this year, I suppose, as educators within the college as well. We've got students writing dissertations, and we're wondering whether we should let them use ChatGPT or whether they should be avoiding it. And so these ethical concerns around that keep coming up as well. But look, we could talk all night about that one. Let's shuffle on, because I know the audience during the week had a few other questions for you. So I'm going to throw another one here at you, Sarah. Where have you found AI helping you the most in your own work?
Yeah, I have found a few things. I really like it at the beginning and the end of a project right now for me. It's really working. I think the ability to generate so many different ideas so quickly is extremely powerful, and it's when the risk is the lowest, right? And so I think using it in that moment, and we were just talking about obviously the ethics of what AI is giving you back, but there is actually something to be said for leveraging the randomness of the model. And so it's quite nice. We're, as human beings and our thought processes, even the best ideators, nothing is quite random, right? And you can leverage AI for that randomness, which I think is really powerful. So I'm using it a lot to ideate, to generate a lot of different concepts very quickly. And then from there, I think using more of my traditional skill set and tools through, I think, the hardest part of the process. And then towards the end to then fine tune or increase the quality, be my copy editor, etc. So Kate's smiling because usually that's Kate, but I can get it I can get it into pretty good shape before I potentially hand something over to her. So I think that is really powerful for me in the beginning of the divergent, and then towards the very end of the convergence, once I've applied that critical skill set and problem solving to then finalize the quality of that output.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think certainly the ideation aspect is really valuable. Now, of course, anytime you're asking something like ChatGPT to give you ideas, you want to make sure you specify, give me like 25 ideas, because a lot of them are going to be garbage. Like a lot of them aren't going to make sense. But if you're looking for one good idea, you probably will find something that, maybe it's not perfect in its original form, but it gets you there. So a specific example, like one of my responsibilities at Nielsen Norman Group is to always be thinking about, what are we going to write about next? What are we going to study next? What does the field, want to know? And as an aside to everybody here on this call, if you ever have questions or you're like, what, I just wish Nielsen Norman Group would write an article about X, Y, or Z, or I'm in a fight with my stakeholders about this thing and I wish NNG had an article about it, I'm always available on LinkedIn. So drop me a DM, tell me what you're curious about. We might write an article on it. So anyway, so recently this week, I was trying to come up with more topics that we could explore related to user experience design in a B2B context, which if we have anybody here who works in that context, can be somewhat challenging. And so, I was just talking to ChatGPT saying, give me some ideas related to this aspect of B2B and UX. Okay, give me some ideas related to these things. And I would say 90% of the ideas were trash, but I got a handful where I was like, yeah, that could be something good. I'll put that in this pile and maybe we'll think about writing it. So that kind of use case is really good. The other thing that I find it's extremely helpful for is desk research. So if I'm trying to answer a question, to research a topic, I always start with Perplexity or I start with ChatGPT. Now, my feeling around using that as a source of information, it's amazing that it provides the synthesis for you. So whereas you used to have to comb through all of these Google results and try to make decisions about whether or not it's going to be a good source and then try to scan through and find the information, AI, especially generative AI, is sort of shortcutting all of that for you. So that's great, but I do treat it like Wikipedia in that it's a good place to start and get that general idea and understanding of the concept, but then I need to go look at actual sources and see where it's pulling that information from. And I will say that Perplexity compared to ChatGPT does a much better job citing its sources. So that tends to be a little bit more reliable.
I think from a user behavior point of view, and this is more of an observation, but I think users are going to become more and more discerning of the outputs. I think right now everyone is amazed at how powerful it is and what it can do and how quickly it can make something that is custom for you. But I think user behavior is going to become much more judicious in the way that we look at it. And I think just to end this question here, I did this LinkedIn post, and this is a really good example. I designed one of these options, which it was number 2, if you're looking at it. But the rest of them I had ideogram create. And I think option 3 is a really interesting concept, actually. So it's this idea of this slogan of it depends, obviously, all about UX and context. It really depends. But I think the interesting idea there is that ideogram put it, and I didn't tell it to put it on a sign. It just generated it. And that's a really good example of a conceptual idea that then I would never use that as the final output. I would then take and apply my discerning design skills to it. But that conceptual idea came from ideogram in 1 minute at no cost, right? And so that's a really good example, kind of weaving it into your already critical thinking skills at moments when it makes sense and is low risk.
And kind of getting back to our earlier discussion on like how to, how to think about AI, how to get started with AI. That's a good example of like, think about smaller pieces, get small pieces of things from these generative AI tools. Don't trust it to write your entire, your report from your research, but use it to help you get ideas about what to study or what kind of tasks you might want to include or something like that. So I think like starting smaller and thinking about those smaller pieces is really good. One other thing that it's not really UX related specifically, but one other thing that I absolutely love about ChatGPT is its shortcuts debugging things. And like if I'm writing an Excel formula, like now I never will Google that. I'm just going to drop that into ChatGPT and have it spit out some code. So some of it's like, even though I used to be a developer, I'm not now, but there's lots of instances where I need to automate things. I love being able to just like really quickly get that answer.
Kate, we actually have a question that got quite a few upvotes from Sampada. Thank you for your question, which is, do you have strong feelings about the free version versus paid version of ChatGPT?
I do.
I know. That's why I asked.
One of my coworkers literally just asked me this yesterday. She was like, "Oh, I'm using, 3.5. Should I upgrade to 4?" And I was like, "Yes, absolutely." And like, and you should reimburse that because it's going to make you a more efficient employee and help you get your job done more quickly. Yeah, there is actually a pretty noticeable difference between the free and the paid version. I promise I am not sponsored by OpenAI. I'm
sponsored and
I wish we were. Wish we got some commission, but we don't. So yeah, to me, it's definitely worth paying for that version. And that's just supposed to just continue to get better with forthcoming GPTs.
I totally agree.
That's great. Thanks very much. Great insights there. And you're obviously watching and listening to the chat as well, because you're picking up on loads of answers here as you go along. And keep them coming, folks. That's great. That link that Sarah mentioned as well, she's a direct link into LinkedIn to show it there as well. Kate, question for you here. Will AI fade into the combination of tools we use, or will it have a larger impact?
Yeah, I think, right now we're having a lot of conversations about like AI, and a lot of AI experts get angry about that because really what we're talking about is like large language models. It's like the AI is a much broader, more complicated umbrella, but in common, language, we're just referring to it as AI. I think right now it is being presented to us in a lot of sort of almost like separate tools that are not integrated into other products that we're using. But that is very much, it's almost like the beta, I think, of these tools. And so right now we've got ChatGPT, which is a separate tool. And if I'm working on some content and, this is another thing I really like with ChatGPT is sometimes I'll be editing an article, and if it's really verbose and wordy, and I'm like, I just don't even know where to start disentangling this, making it easier to read, I'll just drop it into ChatGPT and have it give me a couple of options. But there are already tools out there, like, for example, Grammarly, that are trying to kind of create hybrid interfaces where they're integrating these AI rewrite tools directly into something like Microsoft Word or Google Docs, so that where you're working and what you're doing, it just has those AI features built in. I would have to say, I've not been very, sorry if anybody works for Grammarly in here, but I have not been super impressed with the quality of those rewrites so far, but they will get better. So I think what we're going to start seeing is there's going to be less talk about like AI, and it's going to be more, I have this tool that can intelligently revise copy for me in the moment. And, you know, it's going to be less about Midjourney as an image generator and more of integration of image generation into tools like Photoshop, which they're already trying to do, but again, haven't been super impressed with what I've seen from so far. Go ahead, Sarah.
Hey, the point you're making for everyone is, I don't stop thinking bigger just because of the way we're being forced to use the technology right now.
Yep.
You know, and I think that a lot of our user behavior is just purely an effect of our one-way transaction. And I think when you really start to think about it being fluent in a lot of the different things that we do is really where the power starts to I think, manifest. Even in our user research right now around AI, we're seeing a lot of jumping between lots of different tools because a lot of the tools don't have AI integrated yet. And that's all just purely the ramification of how we have to use the tool today. So I think that's really important to think about. And then I also think that there's a lot of AI that's been in products for years now.
Yeah.
And the underpinnings have been there. And I think that, you know, we have obviously recently made such a large leap forward. But I think that there's probably stuff to be learned from Airbnb. I know has had AI helping hosts figure out the cost of a night, for example. And so I think it's very small moments like that obviously make a really big difference for that host and in that experience, and it's extremely tailored to that need or what would otherwise be a really tedious task to not just, you know, decide how much, but also a lower likelihood of success. And so I think we're going to start to see a lot more of it both woven in and also extremely specific use cases, as has been happening for the past 5 years.
And that is where so it's definitely been happening, but it's sort of accelerating, and the quality of those tools are improving, and the complexity of the problems they can solve is getting better. That's going to continue. And so that's exciting because that's where the power of these, you know, smart tools is going to come through. It's also exciting for us as people who work in user experience because we're going to have to start thinking about, all right, where are the opportunities here? Where are the places where we can benefit our users by automating some of these things or giving them smarter advice or smarter product recommendations? Right now, I'm seeing a lot of product teams just rushing at getting a conversational AI tool on there. Yeah, it's in situations where I'm like, you didn't need that. Like, for example, I just saw an e-commerce app recently that has this new feature. It's like, here's your AI shopper. It's like, that's lazy. Like, you're thinking about the existing implementation. You're not thinking about more creative ways to more seamlessly integrate the power of AI into your product.
You are abandoning the point of our job, which is identifying what the actual problem is.
Yes.
First, not jumping to the solution. And I think I always come back to that. Obviously, Jacob wrote a really good article about UX angst around AI, and that's probably I think, a good summary of the general feeling of a lot of people. And it's so ironic to me because I think that in a lot of ways, we're just going to be even more important in order to help users actually leverage the abilities of this technology in a way that isn't what we're being forced to do. Because really the user experience of all of these generative AI tools is really horrible. And I would say we're starting very, very low. But to Kate's point, I think we're just going to have even more complex problems to continue to solve.
Yeah, you know what I think?
Sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Kate. Go ahead.
I was just going to add really quickly to put a bow on this. Like, I also think a lot of this is coming through like leadership in companies who are being told like AI is the future, get AI in your product. And so then they're telling their product teams, put AI somewhere in the product. So they're just slapping these little bots in places where they don't make sense, which we've seen iterations of this happen every time there's new technology.
This, look, you're leading into seamlessly into this last question, and it was a very popular question during the week on LinkedIn. Sarah, for yourself to lead out in this one, maybe, how will AI affect UX roles?
Yep. Yeah. Listen, there is a wave happening, and I would get on the wave or you're going to be left behind. I think that people who fear, you have reasons to be suspicious. I actually think suspicious is good. It's that critical discernment and curation that you need. But you have to start using these tools because they're not going to replace us, but they're certainly, they're not going to replace critical thinkers and people who are truly gifted practitioners at what we do, problem solving, user research, design. But it's going to lift kind of that bottom talent. So if you're in this kind of average middle zone, all of a sudden you're going to have a lot more competition because all those people that maybe didn't have the talent or ability to create before are now going to be able to. So to me, it's leveraging all of the same skill sets we've always been using and we've always been taught, right? And it's now just leveraging the ability to work more efficiently, explore at almost no cost, which I think is really significant, and then fine-tune our curation and taste. And to me, that's how this new technology is going to change our industry in terms of jobs and roles. So get on, I would say get on board, start small, and then practice and continue to use the same critical problem solving skills you always have.
I totally agree with all of that, Sarah. I think that's very true. One thing I would add though is like, you can't outsource your creativity or your judgment to these tools. So while it's important that you hop on board the AI train, you also need to keep doing the kind of traditional things that we've always done to try to make ourselves better UX professionals. You need to be developing your instincts for what's a good or a bad design. You need to be thinking critically about the kinds of problems you solve and finding ways to kind of play this mediator role between the needs of the business or the organization that you work for and the needs of the people that this product serves. I do worry a lot about younger or less experienced UX professionals relying too heavily on these generative AI tools because as most of you probably know, they're not always reliable. They can hallucinate. And while they're pulling from a lot of good, solid UX advice that's available on the internet, they're also pulling from a lot of very bad UX advice. And what these tools are great at is making bad advice and false information sound plausible and good. That's true for any kind of domain, but with UX specifically, it's so nuanced. And it's really hard when you're new to it to know, like, is this good advice or bad advice? So I would just say, like, yes, definitely get started with AI, definitely treat it as an assistant, play around with it, get a good feel for how it works, what it's good for, what it's not. But then also make sure that you are kind of independent from that, using your judgment, because it's context and it's curation, but it's also judgment.
Yeah. I think, Kate, you said something really interesting, which is if you're new to the field and you may not have the experience to be able to discern how high quality the output is, especially when it comes to UX related, say, tasks or different design approaches, etc. My best advice is if you're young and new, get on a team with people with more experience. Do not be a lone wolf UXer team of one, because the only way to learn that judgment is to learn from people more experienced in the field. And I think that is really important and something that AI isn't going to be able to do for you. And for all those of you who are more experienced, that is kind of also your role, right? As things continue and anyone can create anything, it's teaching the skill sets that we've always had to practice by hand, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if I could just put a bow on that, at a quick little plug, make sure that you are, in addition to, getting insights and ideas and information and advice from these generative AI, conversational AI tools, make sure that you're also getting advice from, organizations that you trust, that are curating what they're telling you, and they're, being practical about the advice they're giving. And I hope that that's what we try to do at Nielsen Norman Group. So if you're interested, definitely check out our free articles, videos, and newsletter.
They're a constant running theme in our UX Masters. They're played all the time. They're a great resource. Here, thanks a million, girls. We're out of time. Thank you very much to Sarah and Kate for their valuable insights and knowledge. I know you could both talk for hours and hours and hours about this here, and I know you do on other podcasts and other videos and so on. I'd also like to thank Donald here in the background for keeping things ticking over. Thanks, Donald. And also the UX team in the background who are always on call as well, which is great. Finally, thanks to the audience for your input during the week and taking big action on LinkedIn. The questions were coming through thick and fast, and it really led to a good line of questioning, I think, which Kate and Sarah could really get their teeth into. So if you want to know more about the 100% online masters that I talked about at the start, you can give myself a shout, Donald, if you could drop up a link to the course page as well, and there's funding opportunities and so on. Donald can help you out with those. But other than that, I'll pass over to Kate and Sarah for a final word here in a minute. But I'd personally like to wish everyone in the audience and your families a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. I do know that Sarah has a koala. And koala. She says it's the dog.
Grab your koala.
I do. This is Augie, everyone. A budding UX professional. Huh.
Very
Well, it's great to meet everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.
Get the final word over to Kate and Sarah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, thanks. It's great to connect with us, tag us, follow us. We'd love to follow you and your AI journey in UX.
Yeah, there were a lot of great questions that I saw come through the chat we didn't have time for, so maybe we can take this conversation to LinkedIn.
Absolutely. Yeah, sounds great. All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks again. Cheerio.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.